Hello, everybody. Scott Golden with the Golden Opportunities Coaching YouTube series here. Life, relationship, business, and trauma core recovery coach. And if you need sessions or would like to start working together, would love to do that for you in 2021. Please feel free to reach out on Twitter at PO Perception or at the website in the About Me section of this particular YouTube channel. We'll get that underway. In any event, we're going to talk today about kind of things to say no to or things to learn to have the no boundary for. And we're going to talk about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of those, I think, 8 or 9. And so basically, there's a lot of things that we need to learn to say no to, and I'm going to run through a lot of these I've probably talked about before. But so but I'm going to put them all here for folks that may be interested. The first is toxic relationships. Look, just because you have a history with someone doesn't mean they're good for you. Just because you have a history with someone doesn't mean they belong in your life now. That can apply to family, friends, relationships, coworkers, mentors, colleagues, whatever. I will say, two of the most toxic people in my life in the last, I'll say 5 years were people, well, let's say 10 years, were both people that I had immense love for at one point in my life, and they were extremely valuable to me. And unfortunately, both of those relationships got toxic. And in one case, I held on to one of them so long that I got physically sick and wound up in a nursing facility for 15 months, as I've detailed here before. Even those of us in the wellness field can allow toxic situations to get the better of us. And so if you notice that your health is failing, if you notice that your mental health or your emotional stability is failing because of a person, look, even if we live 100 years, which is like kind of the maximum for human existence now, who knows if it's going to be that in the end, but even if we live 100 years, life's too short to deal with people who drain you or who lead you to feel that saying no is impossible, but then you never feel like you're getting anywhere with them. So it's important to look at that. The next is kind of like that, and that's about feeling safe. Whether it's physical safety, emotional safety, mental safety, financial safety, sometimes you can love someone so much, but they can be bad for you. And knowing that your safety matters more than their happiness, I think, is one of the things that our society, especially in Western culture, doesn't teach. Sometimes there are people that need to fall and they need to learn life lessons that can only come through not being supported or overly supported. Sometimes there are people that don't want to improve their lives and they just latch on to other people simply because they are traumatized and they believe that it's their right to have the world take care of them. And if you're dealing with a person like this, you may feel it's your obligation to take care of them until the end of time. But if that's leading you to feel unsafe in any way, then you need to reevaluate that. The next thing is people that make you feel ignored. Look, you matter. Your thoughts matter. Your feelings matter. Your opinions matter. The things you do matter. The creativity you have matters. Everything about you matters. And if a person makes you feel ignored or invisible or insignificant, then they need to go. I mean, everybody gets busy, and we all kind of take people for granted from time to time, and it happens. But if it becomes a history, if it becomes something you almost expect or you're afraid to approach them and it gets unhealthy, you're only setting yourself up to have more difficulty in the future building healthy relationships because you start to doubt your own judgment. And if you're at a place where you're doubting your own judgment already, that's only going to get worse. So it's important to have proper boundaries in that regard. Next is abandonment. So, if you feel like you have been abandoned or you feel like a person has abandoned you in a way that's not visible, meaning maybe they don't keep their word. Maybe they are flirtatious with somebody and you've asked them not to be. Maybe they've abandoned what matters to you by telling your secrets. Maybe they've abandoned you by not being consistent with keeping dates. There's a million ways to feel abandoned, and so I think abandonment a lot of times we only think of as like parents abandoning children or being children that have been abandoned by their parents, and that's very real. And but at the same time, there are some situations where, parents who are unhealthy or parents who aren't equipped for parenthood do need to walk away, and it's in the best interest of the child. And sometimes there are children that need to walk away from dark triad, unhealthy parents or family members. But if you have abandonment related issues, it's your duty to talk to those who are closest to you about them so that they know how not to hurt you. But also, it's your ability and responsibility not to allow yourself to be re-triggered, and that can be extremely difficult. Now, self-talk is the next thing on this list because at the end of the day, our self-talk governs how we respond and we deal with the challenges of just going through life on a day-to-day basis. Now, self-talk speaks to how we talk in our heads to ourselves, get ourselves through things. And sometimes it's necessary to be neutral and sometimes even a little self-critical. Hey, I could have done better here, or I could have thought this through a little bit better there. But at the same time, the majority of your self-talk should be positive, such as, hey, you didn't know everything you needed to know to make that decision. You'll get them next time. Hey, you're doing the best you can, or you're doing the best you believe you can in this moment, and that's good enough, and you're good enough. And so when we monitor our self-talk, it should be more positive than negative. I mean, in a utopian world, we'd want it to be all positive, but that is very, unhealthy to expect of ourselves. And the more we expect that level of perfection, the more we set ourselves up for falling short and probably abstract failure. But at the same time, our self-talk needs to be more positive than negative. Obviously, abusive situations, which is next on this list, get out of those as quickly as you can. The longer you stay, the harder it is to heal, the longer it takes to heal, because our body, from a neurosynaptic standpoint, from an automatic standpoint, expects us to be mistreated. And so when we meet new people and we want to be in new situations and we want to have new experiences, but our expectation is being hurt, guess what we're going to do? We're going to continue to look for ways to be hurt. And so that makes starting over really difficult. The longer we stay, the longer the healing process. So obviously, if you're in an abusive situation, get out of there as quickly as possible. The next thing is being stuck. So obviously, we can't change, from $1 to $1,000,000 in a day, unless we're really, really lucky and we're one in several million people. But what can you do today that gives yourself a chance of a brighter tomorrow? There's always a change you can make in your outlook, in what you're doing, in your routine, in the value of what's important to you. You can change what you listen to. You can change who you talk to. There's a lot of changes you can make to your physical body, your emotional well-being, and all of this. Make positive, progressive changes every day, no matter how small. When you get in the habit of making changes, you then give yourself a better chance of being successful overall. The next is the illusion of competition or comparing. So the illusion of competition is the idea that, well, Mr. Jones is ahead of me, Bob is ahead of me, Sarah is ahead of me, and they're doing better than me, and therefore they're more successful than me, and therefore they're better looking than me, and therefore they're richer than me, and therefore. But you don't know. See, the problem with that way of thinking is you don't know what they had to do to get there. One, you don't know if they're really happy with their decisions. Two, you don't know if they feel insecure about what they're going through. Three, so all of a sudden you're comparing and contrasting when in reality they're trying to hold up what they've got going on because they're just as insecure as you are, but you're looking at them and they're looking at you and everybody's looking at each other, and the illusion of competition doesn't matter. We weren't created to compete. Competition is an instinct that goes back to caveman times, which helped people to survive, but it's not as important now. The more individualistic a person becomes, the more embracing of oneself a person becomes, the less likely competition is necessary. There is enough food on the planet for everybody, despite what the media will tell you. There is enough love in the world with 7 billion people, despite what people will tell you. There is enough of everything. Now, whether we see it, whether we go after it, whether we focus on it, who knows? But the focus on comparing that less is more and more is less and I am good and you are bad and all these illusions of competition actually take us away from actually accomplishing the majority of the things we're capable of. The next is waiting for things to change. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about, waiting in a line or a traffic light, but If you're waiting for a person to do something differently and they haven't in months, if you're waiting for someone to give you an opportunity at work and it's been years, if you're waiting for someone to ask you out, if you're waiting for, someone at work to notice how hard you work, stop waiting and start doing. Even if you do something and it turns out negatively, at least then you have the leverage to embrace other possibilities that are away from what you're waiting on. The more you wait, the more you waste. And so wait is often wasteful. Now, if there's other things you can work on while you're waiting for something else to come to fruition and you have peace about it, that's a completely different thing. But when the waiting becomes a burden, the minute it becomes uncomfortable to the point of not enjoying what you're doing anymore, it's time to move forward. The next thing is don't put up with bullying. Obviously, this is so simple, but yet people do it all the time. Whether it's cyberbullying or just joking that sounds like bullying, look, if something bothers you, cut it off immediately. Hey, that's over the line for me. There's a difference between good natured ribbing between friends, but even that can go too far. But you also do have to have a boundary with people. Some people may think you're fine with something you're not. And so the minute you feel bullied or physically threatened or emotionally threatened, you do need to say something. Now, will it sometimes lead to a confrontation you don't want? Yes. But that confrontation will be coming sooner or later anyway. And so you've got to find a way to deal with it, get through it, get past it, get around it, so you can move on into a more, you know, um, balanced way of being and way of life. The last one is stop trying to fit in. So here's the thing, find the group that will accept you where you are. There's literally millions of groups on Facebook and social media now. There's millions of groups on places like Meetup. There's places to go. There's groups you could start. You can start a message board conversation or chat thread in an app, or there's a million ways you can do it. Find your group, create your group. Don't wait for a group to form that's right for you, because if you spend the time waiting, you may never get to where you need to be, and that can be extremely difficult. That can be extremely painful, and it doesn't always go the way you want it to go. So it's certainly effective and efficient to, kind of be mindful that you may not always get what you want out of situations without being more proactive. Hopefully this has been helpful. Keep your feet on the ground, your mind in the moment. Till next time, everybody.